Good, thank you. And yeah, I'd like to welcome you all as well. So thank you very much for coming down to BMW Park Lane. And I am Will Beaumont from Werke, the founder and editor, and it is a pleasure to introduce you to Steve Saxty, if you don't already know him. We'll get on to talking about BMW design and the books in detail and all that sort of stuff. But if you do have any questions throughout this evening, just pop your hand up. I won't take it as a slight on my presenting skills. I'm sure that your answers will be fantastic. So I'll try and weave you in, but we will probably do questions at the end as well. So again, if you've got questions to save up, don't worry about that. So right then, let's get going. I feel like now we're on these sort of blind date style stools. I should ask you, what's your name? Where'd you come from? But I suppose really what I'm going to say, who are you and how did this all start? How did this book come about?
Oh, crikey. Well, evening, everybody. Can you all hear me, firstly? Yep, okay. I'm told when I speak to an American audience, I talk too fast, but now I'm home with the Brits, I can speak as quickly as I like. So where did the book come from? Well, it was a curious thing, actually. It sounds a bit romantic, but it's actually true. It was snowing. I live in New York, despite the accent, and it was a snowy Sunday morning, and the phone rings, and it was a gentleman by the name of Harm Lagai, and some of you maybe Porsche enthusiasts will know that name. And Harm used to be the chief designer at Porsche, as well as being the designer of the Sierra Cosworth. And I previously wrote a series of books on Ford, and so I got to know Harm from the Ford books. So he rings me up, and he said, "I've only got 20 minutes. I've got a pizza in the oven." I'm like, "Okay. Why is this quite well-known designer ringing me up on a Sunday morning for cooking advice?" And he's not quite getting to the point, and he's Dutch, and the Dutch are pretty direct. And I'm like, there must be a reason why he's calling. I said, "Okay, Harm, how can I help?" I'm thinking his pizza might be ready. And he said, "Well, I know of a book you should write." Now, I used to work for Porsche. He was the chief designer at Porsche. I was expecting him to say, and the world isn't necessarily crying out for another Porsche book. They tend to be if not every week, certainly every other week. And I was waiting for him to say Porsche, and he said, "You should write a book on BMW." And I thought, that's so strange, because just 2 weeks ago, Adrian van Hooydonk, the chief designer of BMW, bought my books. I see a list of who buys the books, and Van Hooydonk is a fairly unusual name, and it's down the list as a V. And so he said, "Yes, I know. He's bought the books. He loves your books. He'd be keen to talk to you if you wanted to do a book on BMW design." And so I whipped my phone out, and I'm going, BMW design books. There's none. I was like, this is amazing. There's never been a book on BMW design. There are plenty of sort of, what engines they have and all that sort of thing. So I thought, well, that could be cool. And so that's really the first introduction. Was I get no credit at all for the idea for these books in the slightest. And that's really where it started.
And to have Adrian behind it, has he been sort of, I suppose, the driving force of this?
Yeah, well, it was funny, because Harm said to me, "You have to write Adrian a letter." Now, Adrian and I are within a few months of each other, so I kind of think, I'm late 50s, is like, you kind of like use email, right? And so I thought, I'll send him an email. And he goes, no, you've got to send him a letter. I was like, really? So I phoned a friend of mine who used to work there. He says, "Oh, no, he's ED." And in BMW, there is, the level is the simpler the letters. So if you're ED 64, you're less seen in ED or E, which is the board member for engineering. And so Adrian is ED, head of design. He's very senior. So my friend said, no, you've got to write him a letter. And I was like, okay, it's two people have told me I've got to write. So I wrote him this letter, and it's still snowing. And I thought, it's so snowy, I'm not going outside. So I went down, we've got a mailbox in the bottom of our building. And so I thought, there's no way it's going to find a mailbox in the bottom of our building in Manhattan, right the way across the Atlantic to this guy's desk. This is never going to happen. And indeed, nothing did happen for about 5 weeks. And I was like, okay, that was probably a really bad idea. And then I get a PDF letter back from Adrian, signed by Adrian. I got a letter, PDF, and email back to me. And he said, sorry I didn't get back to you earlier. I've been giving this a lot of thought, and I've come up with what I think is a good idea. If you're willing to talk, we'll have a chat via Teams. And I was like, who's going to turn down the chance to have a video chat? It was middle of sort of COVID too. And so we've got this Teams chat set up, and it's 30 minutes. I thought, well, 30 minutes of the group chief designer. Remember, Adrian is not just the chief designer of BMW. He's at group level, so it's Rolls-Royce, Mini, Motorrad as well. So it's got 30 minutes. I thought, right, we're going to get 30 minutes. So about an hour and 10 minutes later, and the first thing he said, why the hell didn't you email me? Well, and with that, I realised he's actually got a really dry sense of humour. He's quite funny to talk to. And we just sort of hit it off. And really, that was the genesis of the books, was I mean, it's, how can I put it? The trust that we had on both sides was from that very first meeting, where nothing was ever held back. It was amazing. It really is. For a company that, with all respects to current and former BMW boys that are sitting in the audience, it doesn't automatically bear its soul. It has a corporate face, as it should. To be given the chance to go so deep behind the scenes with a company, I had that gift from Ford. I never quite expected to be given that gift from a second company, and certainly not as deep as BMW gave us.
And that key to that, to unlocking those doors, was Adrian and guiding you through that.
It was, but there's also an element where, great, you got the man at the top sanctions it, but there's also an element, who are these people I had never met beneath, and are they going to go, no, we're not giving you any of our secrets. And that was the biggest surprise, is the more I dug, the deeper the enthusiasm.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll take nothing away from it, starting with Adrian, obviously, but once everybody was behind it, they were totally behind it. They really were.
Yeah.
It was remarkable, actually.
Well, I suppose, with all of that information, with all of that access that you've got, I suppose containing it to just one book, it seems like quite a monumental task, which is why I suppose it's not just one book, is it? We're talking about, the whole thing is a 3-book set.
Yeah, well, it's on the poster, but it's sitting down there, and we'll have some there if you guys obviously want to look later and even buy some. But I always had a plan to do a couple of books, and that goes back from, has anybody here got my Ford books? Oh, well, thank you, welcome. And when I started doing the Ford books, straight away, before I'd even done the first one, people say, I want the special edition. I'm like, really? Let me finish the book first. Don't look for a special edition version, for goodness sake. And now I realize that all anybody ever buys is the special edition versions of a book. I had no comprehensions when I started. So I said to Adrian, I said to everybody, well, I'm going to have to do a special edition 2-book set. And they went, it's ambitious enough what you're trying to do with one. And the more I dug, the more the sort of cup overflowed, and clearly ended up as 3 books. But it was a tough strategic concept to conceive of what's 3 books that don't trip over each other. And that's really how it sort of mushroomed into that 3-book set. But I should also call out Mel Nichols, my editor there, by the way. So thank you, Mel, for all your editing, and Adrian Morris over there in the distance, who actually has designed them all along the way. So thank you, guys, because frankly, it has my name on the cover, but without you too. So thank you. And God Almighty, did we work hard?
Well, you can tell, because it's if you're here because you know my magazine Werke, or if you're here because you know what a great sort of collaboration this is, because both of the sort of creating a quality product is obviously really is what we both sort of clearly care about, and so you're creating that, and going to the level of detail that you do, and I think you've obviously gone to sort of extreme detail with creating this, and I think one of the really interesting, fascinating stories is about it's wrapped in a orange slipcase, and the sort of story behind the orange I think is really interesting.
So as you can, let me hold it up so you can see it. So this is probably, and Nick, by the way, Nick who handles my PR is kindly in sync with the orange. So thank you, Nick. So this is orange for a particular reason, and the reason it's orange is because of Paul Bracke. And for those of you that don't know the name Paul Bracke, he was BMW's chief designer in the 70s. And back in those days, if you were chief designer, you were not senior enough to have a company car. And so Paul Bracke, how times change. So Paul Bracke didn't have a company car, but he did have a Porsche as his own car. And it was a ruby red 356, and he loved the color of that car. And the vehicle that many people will know of him for is the E25 Turbo, the show car with the gold wings. And when it came to display the car, the idea was, and this is all the 70s, remember, is safety was a big thing, a new thing even, was to paint the car fluorescent orange front and rear as a safety highlight. And let me just pop that down. I'm not that strong. And he'd, as an independent designer, had a studio overlooking the French Air Force nearby, and they had trainer aircraft. And for those of you that grew up making airfix kits like I did, you may remember the French training aircraft had orange wingtips to them. And so they used orange paint to paint the wingtips. But the problem with painting a plane, it either gets scratched, crashed, or the paint peels off. And so they moved to using decals. So Paul Brack wanders over there and asks for the cans of fluorescent orange paint. And sure enough, he used the paint on the front of the E25 Turbo. And that's one of the stories that I'm sort of pleased to have uncovered that got lost over the mist of time for BMW as to why orange is one of the signature colours of BMW alongside the traditional greys and blues, etc., was because Paul Brack nicked some paint from the French Air Force. And I must be honest, I had sort of BMW's colour and trim people were offering me opinions on this. They were all very keen to help, imagine this. And Adrian, you can remember we were mocking up different colours of the slipcase and this thing. And one day I was like, I'm just not going to listen to anybody. You know, it's going to be orange, and it's going to be Paul Brack orange, and that's the colour it is. It's as simple as that.
So uncovering stories like that don't happen by chance. You must have spent an awful lot of time and had gone backwards and forwards to Munich and to New York quite a lot. I mean, how long did you spend sort of in Munich doing this book?
Oh, the fact that I can't remember tells me there's more than I realised. I must have spent probably about 7 weeks in total there, but I mean, we all live in a world of teams, so I mean, I was chatting daily by video to people, but I remember, I mean, Munich's a short hop from here, but clearly from New York, it's not so much. So yeah, I must have camped out there for about 7 or 8 weeks in total, I think, something like that.
When you're there, where are you focusing your time? Where do you get to go? What do you kind of get directed to, and where do you want to find out? Where do you end up?
Well, I mean, I spent most of my time actually so I'm sure that most of you have seen car magazines, or those of you that work in the industry will know you get the studio, and traditionally the studio is the clay models and the designers are sketching around the edge sort of thing. That's kind of changed basically, and so today's designers sit in front of a computer like the rest of us, and the clay models are covered over because people walk around with camera phones, and a lot of modeling is done digitally. So it's not quite not the cliche, but what I grew up with when there would be a sort of an emporium of cars around the edge and models in the middle. And so where the designers work is at workstations. So it sounds less glamorous than it perhaps is. I mean, there's still a lot of glamour in it, but they're working like the rest of us at the computer terminal. And so, but to get into the area where the design department is quite amazing. So it's at a building or a facility called the Fitz. Ian's going to correct me on my German, so I'm not going to try it, actually, I decided. But the building houses around 20,000 engineers, but the design department is a much smaller group within that. But to get into it, you have to have a special code. You can't just stroll in. So most of the employees cannot go into the design.
You're not going to wander that way accidentally.
So that's where I was sort of behind it. But the fun thing is to go in, you have these sort of rotating doors, and it's a bit sort of like the old sort of 70s and 80s movies, and it can get one and you sort of creep through sort of thing. And so you stand there and you're like, I hope I've not had too many sandwiches, and you go. and this sort of thing rotates around you. So I basically was pretty lucky. I spent most of my time behind the rotating doors, if you like, talking to the guys there.
I suppose BMW design, although in Munich is obviously sort of where the core of it is, but it's an international, I mean, not just in terms of the designers, but also the locations around. So how were you were you able to have access to lots of those places as well?
Yeah, I mean, so BMW's got its Design Works outfit, which is tasked with not just designing BMWs, but product as well. So it does product design as well as vehicle design. So they will take on external commissions, and they have studios in Shanghai. They actually have one in Munich separate to the main facility, and where they start his design works in just outside LA. So, but all the stuff rotate through. I mean, that's the other thing. So, I mean, I was talking to people and they were on the secondment off to, it's such a digital world now, So, but yeah, I mean, they were all involved basically in terms of helping. They're a very international team.
Yeah. Well, so the book is mostly, I suppose, the core of it, and it's based around the concepts and things like that. That's really sort of where we are, and particularly secret concepts a lot of the time as well. So when what is the car that you sort of, what's the car in the book do you think has the most sort of fascinating backstory?
Well, they become. It's funny actually. So when you're writing a book, has anybody out here written books? There must be some. Steve, it's about time you wrote a book actually. When you write a book, you're almost treating them like your little children in each chapter. So each one I came across, I would invest all my time into it. And even with the Ford books, I could invest all my time in a Ford Fiesta just as much as something glamorous.
Yeah.
And it would be just the same with this. So when I'm writing about each one of them, it is that chapter you're vested in and that story. So sometimes objectively, I love all my children equally, I suppose. But probably the one that seems to have captured everybody's imagination inside BMW and within the press over here and the readers is the 2K2, which was a fascinating car. So there's a 2002 up on the image on the cover there, and there's one around the corner there. The 2002 was very much the hero, particularly for the American market.
Yeah.
Probably put the company on the map there more than anything else. And it was also the genesis, if you like, of the M3 and the 3 Series sporting appeal. And there was a plan to bring back the 2002 in quite an advanced way in the 90s. So rather conveniently, the year 2002 was looming on the horizon. There was the car called the 2002. Well, if you're a creative person, that's a gift, my friend. Let's bring back the 2002 for the year 2002. And by chance, there was a succession of designers have been toying with this concept, and there was an engineer who was thinking about how to engineer low-cost composite-bodied cars, and so they all sort of tumbled into each other. It's quite a nice story, but basically there was a designer called Andreas Zapatinas, who later became the chief designer at Alfa Romeo, was at BMW at the time, and he is a Greek gentleman and still has a 2002 in his retirement in Greece. And he conceived, instead of the BMW Compact being an entry point 3 Series, the Compact, for those of you that don't know it, is the hatchback 3 Series from 20 years ago. And he conceived it as a more romantic 2002 type of entry-level car rather than a sort of hatchbacky shopping type thing. And so he started conceiving this car. Then an engineer called Ralph Langmeyer, who's now chief engineer on Cullinan, on Rolls-Royce Cullinan, he was looking at composite structures and had heard about the idea of a 2002 was floating around inside design and said, okay, why don't we try and strip back the 3 Series coupe, rebuild it with a composite body which lightens it, pare back the interior, no hi-fi, let people buy the interior stereos they want or whatever, and change the seats, all the stuff that the young people do. Let's make it as low cost as we can and bring back the 2002. And this is one of those cars that would never be seen had I not been lucky enough to knock on the right doors. They built this as a fully functioning runner. We were like, should we drive it? Should we? I mean, the people over there, it had not been started in 20 years. I heard about it, but I didn't have any images of it. Yeah. And so I thought, I wonder if it still exists. And so I spoke to BMW Classic, and there is an off-site storage that isn't widely known about. And sure enough, the car is still in storage. And so we had it dragged out and photographed. This thing has not been out in daylight in 30 years, and it's a beautiful looking little. It's literally a crossbreed between what you would regard as the first generation 1 Series and a 2002, and it's a fully drivable vehicle. You could, windscreen wipers work and everything, and it's a really cool car. And the engineers got so excited that they demanded that I join them with a guy who's, if you're really into BMW, you know the name Max Scobel. He's the guy that built the original 3 Series wagon, and he built this car too. And says, right, we're all going to go out for dinner. Now, Max, I don't think speaks English, but it didn't seem to worry him too much that night. And so we all went out for dinner and we're chatting away, and everybody's very enthusiastic, and there's just so much enthusiasm about it. And the fact that we managed to get the various design sketches and the car physically still exists in photograph, it's a wonderfully romantic story. And there's so much passion for these guys that have all risen up through the ranks over the years. They still look back 20 years as, wow, you know. And without that car, there's no question the 1 Series would not have evolved the way it did.
Yeah.
So there is a debt very much owed to that car.
Do you think that that's one of the most significant concept cars that BMW has produced, even though it was kind of kept secret? Or is there perhaps something that's maybe even more significant than that?
Well, I mean, there's 2 types. So, I mean, there's a concept in terms of proving a validation for a concept.
Yeah.
And then there's perhaps the more literal concept of a concept car that would be shown in public. So there's perhaps 2 different definitions you could apply to a concept car. In terms of concept cars that are seen in the public, probably there's 2, I mean, that's one of the most significant concept cars, the Vision Efficient Dynamic. But the other one was the Vision Next 100, which is, for those of you that remember, is the gold-coloured cars with the gold-wing doors. Now, when I saw that car, I must be honest with you, I didn't quite think it was anything other than a bit of a blingy-looking 4-door car. Now, I've been and looked at this car, and it's the most amazing engineering jewel. I mean, it has front wings that turn and everything, and it's all beautifully engineered. But its significance was it freed up their creativity so much. And that's the thing that I probably learned in my time there, is how important these vehicles are from a creative perspective.
Right.
And the creative debt to what's to come with the Neue Klasse is very much owed to that Vision X100 gold car. And I didn't know that at the time, because of course I wasn't in the future, I was in the past. And so, but I can safely say now that was a really inspirational turning point for the creative.
Given the freedom to do these wild and exceptional concept cars is what sort of like then creates the passion and the interest to carry on, and then maybe guides where it.
I mean, well, that car was conceived when it was an era of ride sharing, autonomous, and electric. Mm-hmm. And so, which way do you go through that path? You know, and so there's an element where that car had to play all 3 strings, if you like. But it also freed them up in terms of thinking about using the windscreen as a display screen, right? And you know, as the biggest screen in your car is not the one down there; it's the one there, right? And that freed up a lot of their thinking, and that's directly inspired the way they'll be moving forward.
So they're not necessarily dictating the direction of the design for this, but they're actually dictating the sort of like the direction of the company to an extent as well.
Absolutely, yeah. So it's not just styling or engineering; it is philosophical. So one of the things that came from that is that project was eyes on the road, hands on the wheel. Mm-hmm. And so I'm driving an X550e at the moment, which has got, I think it's level 2 autonomous. It helps you be a better driver, you know. I mean, but autonomous driving, whatever. But the point would be is, sure, rocking around here, I don't mind a bit of help keeping me in the lane there when it's a bit of a pain, you know. But it's done in a BMW way. It's not too intrusive. And that's their philosophy of that technology, which came from that project, to help you to be a better driver rather than to take away your. And it's a fine line, right? But they learn from that project, and that's how. Those concepts are so much more than we might imagine when we're out in the punter's world of saying, oh, that's a pretty car on a motor show stand. It has fundamentally informed their thinking.
You talk about doing things in a BMW way, obviously through technology, but again, going back to design, doing things in a BMW way is obviously really important to BMW. You know, the cars that we often see and the concepts, and some of the cars that are sort of behind us now as we're talking, all have a very sort of BMW essence to them. And again, that, you know, exploring those things through concepts. I mean, what car, I suppose, eventually ends up, what mass production car has to sort of like is most loyal to its sort of concept routes through that sort of like BMW sort of narrative? Where what car has that BMW-ness to it that's most strong, do you think?
Well, I suppose the company holds 3 Series very close to its heart, growing from 2002. And look to Ian here again. 2 Series came really as a way of almost distilling a bit more 3 Series into something smaller as well. And I think that's always been in their soul. And I know that, for example, this is no great secret, when the Neue Klasse production version of that car comes out, it's a saloon car. And they are so happy that one particular competitor recently said, oh, we're giving up on the saloon car. They could not be more excited that one of their major competitors has decided not to make saloon cars, because it's very much in their soul. And they don't have to do it, but they definitely will do it.
Yeah. So I suppose going back to sort of, the secrets within the book, and that's kind of what has made this sort of so special and so stand out. You must have met an incredible amount of people when doing it and going it. But was there one person that sort of stands out as just harboring all the possible secrets, who's just absorbed everything over the years?
Well, you probably imagine it's all the designers. They do. They absorb it all. But actually, it was a conversation I had with one engineer, and this you got to appreciate. I mean, it sounds very glamorous, and it is up to a point. Don't misunderstand me. But they're working at computer terminals like most of us. And so I walked down to see this guy, and he said, "I'm amazed you've been allowed to talk to me." He said, "I don't even tell my wife what I do." He said, "This is huge." He said, I had to call Adrian. I couldn't believe that you're here to talk to me. And well, he was so excited to talk to me. And so he spent probably 2 hours talking to me about how excited about all the things he's not allowed to talk about. And but the passion that was in him was just bottled up. And it was this sort of random conversation. And one of the things he does is he's what they call in old, anybody from vehicle engineering, what we used to call package engineering. It's now vehicle architecture. He would do the architecture, but he also had this tool of measuring proportions. He said, I've got this tool, I can measure all the proportions of every car. I can tell you exactly why people like Tesla, but they don't like the EQS. And he's got it, I'll show you this. And I go, okay, you don't want to show me that far into the future, but okay. And he's so excited, and he's got this tool of all the proportions and everything, and he's got the packaging and everything. And he says, and I tell you now that one will be the best we've ever done, because I can prove it to you empirically. I don't care what the designers say. I know that we, the engineers, are going to give them the most stunning looking car we've done in 20 years. And he got so excited, and I'm sitting there going like, well, I can see why your wife probably doesn't want to know about everything you do. And, but it was just that sort of pleasure for me. I thought that's a moment that always comes back to me. It was the designers are always just excited and happy. It's the creative soul. But an engineer to get so enthused about his role, and I thought, well, that's a little bit of the secret of it. He took his view as to make the cars look just as good and as the designers. There's no doubt in his mind that was really, really important.
Yeah. See, there's a huge amount of, we've got a question over there. If you'd like.
I was talking to you earlier, Steve. Could we just go back to the beginning a little bit? Could you say what BMW records are actually like? What did you do on the first day?
What did I do on the first day? Well, on the first day, it was more a question. Sorry, Steve, I can't see you there. On the first day, it was more a question of getting to know people, introduce yourself, and so it wasn't really that I was in the records so much. But what I did have was the good fortune of one particular guy who is I should explain, there is the archives that the company has, the regular archives, and then there is the design archive. So the design archive is off-site, secret location, warehouse, all of the cliches are true there. And it's actually where the long-range headlight testing department building is, if you're on the phone. And that is an archive that's got sort of the wheels and perhaps, actually this would be a great story for Autocar, I should tell you this now. So I discovered all the Rover designs, I found the Van Pla, the Rovers, the Triumphs, they're all there on giant boards in the archives there, and I thought, well, that's a story there, isn't it? So I got, but most of the time, there's so much stuff that I needed a navigator, and so there was a man called Dave Karp who was assigned to work with me, and
So you had a mind, you had a...
yeah, I mean, and this stuff is priceless. I mean, it goes back 100 odd years, so I mean, I wouldn't want to wander around on my own. I mean, I needed an expert navigator that knows where stuff is.
Is there a big shed full of concepts? Are there hundreds of full-size models?
Yes. There are several sheds actually. Yeah. What happens is there is a big storage warehouse. I mean, they're just what you'd anticipate, as anonymous as could be. You walk by it and it's sort of north of Munich, and you go up on nothing whatever. And they sort of keep them there, but when they feel that they don't want to use it, then it will be handed over to BMW Classic, and then BMW Classic will take some of the more significant concepts in. But the problem is these things are fragile. So, I mean, you take these things, they're static models. You can't drive them around, so they need careful handling. And so for BMW Classic, they're a bit of a pain to take on board because you got to have those electronic handler things to move them around. But they do keep an awful lot of the stuff, yes. I mean, they are hoarders.
Just one more question, sorry about this, but what was your own relationship with BMW before? Because your head was full of Ford, wasn't it? And then you got Ford.
Well, you once wrote that I'm the ultimate Ford buff, but of course I've had an industry experience working with all the different manufacturers. So I worked with BMW when they were trying to figure out what to do with Rover, all my fault, obviously. So that was fun. The early days of the Rolls-Royce project as well. But ironically, never directly much on BMW, curiously enough. But that also went some way, I think, in terms of, we drive BMWs as well, my wife and I. So that also helped. I think there's a sort of family thing there, I think, that counted for something.
You had a high regard for BMW design already.
I think it's always intrigued me, yes, because, I mean, if you look back to some of the more, I mean, you'll notice from a journalistic perspective, controversy also sells, as well as something that's just beautifully bland, if you like. So, I mean, I found it always technically fascinating. I think BMW design is, whether you like some of them or not, it's never quiet in the room, is it? That's all I can say, and I like it for that, yeah. So yes, I think I've always been a fan of learning from it, yeah.
Okay, thank you. So obviously going, as you say, sort of talking, going in behind the scenes and having this, looking through the archives and all the, and going to such depths with these cars, is that you must have uncovered certain elements of things that perhaps, made connections that perhaps even BMW may not have made.
Oh yeah, I mean, case in point would be the orange there, but the one I found funny was. There was a car that BMW had built as, and it was sort of unique in its collection of cars, which was the BMW Garmisch. Now, the Garmisch originally was a 1970 show car built by Petone, the Italian design company, and it disappeared without trace. And this car featured big hexagonal grille, and usually BMW was going back to BMW's thought of big hexagonal grilles, which, by the way, Petone had been really pushing BMW to use way back in the 70s. So it was a nice opportunity to remind, perhaps, large grilles have always come and gone inside their history. So the Garmisch was recreated, and I had really low expectations. So a lot of these cars, when you see them, they have what they call resin. It's a plastic sort of shell. They're not real cars. But I found the Garmisch in storage, and the guy said, "Oh, you want to drive it?" And I'm like, he says, "No, it's completely fully functional." He said, "It's built on a 2002," and you open the bonnet, and it's a production car. And I go, "What the earth?" And I inquired, and basically, BMW Classic were commissioned to restore an old 2002, like we have there, and it was stripped down and rebuilt 3 years ago, just like the original from the 70s. So in itself, it was a much more interesting car than I'd realized. It was fully functional. The only thing that doesn't work is the radio. They can't get the radio to work. It crackles, but the windscreen wipers work and everything. So this car's fully functional, the Garmisch. And I looked at this and I was like, but why did they do it? What was it? And I mentioned Dave Carver. He comes up with this image from the archives. He says, doesn't that look familiar? And it's labeled E21 Alternative D. E21 is the first generation 3 Series. So I did what you couldn't do in the 70s, a digital overlay. And I realized that what BMW had not, or rather Bertone had done, and BMW hadn't realized, is Bertone were pitching this as a show car at the Turin show, but it was actually their proposal for the 3 Series that they made into a concept car. Right. But it had been lost to time that actually was, in theory, you could argue that's the very first 3 Series, and it had been recreated, but we didn't quite know that missing link because we hadn't seen that drawing because it had lied down in the archives there by Bertone, that was Bertone's E21 submission. So I think it's kind of cool that we rediscovered that bit of missing link history, and so it's probably the most valuable 3 Series that never was in the world.
We've done the 200 or 2002 has been mentioned an awful lot, so perhaps maybe that is the answer. But going back to sort of like kind of real cars that have made production, if you were to put your money on sort of the classic that you would want to buy, the classic that you think is going to that's going to do well, what is it that's sort of going to define BMW sort of from real point of view? What are you going to have in your garage?
Well, I do bounce around. I've promised myself, I've promised Adrian, I've promised my wife, but she doesn't agree, is to buy a classic. So my first thought is an IA convertible, because I think it suits, well, the product premise works as a convertible better than it does as a coupe. And the other is, probably the cliche, is the one in coupe, which is why I requested that we have that there tonight, because I'll try and drive it home. And so those are the ones that pull up my heartstrings a little bit, but that's probably my age as well. They are my era cars, if you like, as well, a little bit. So yeah, those are two that obviously spring to mind.
So the i8, and obviously the i3 and i8, that was clearly a moment for BMW, which sort of really led by concepts and stuff. And I think suppose the common factor with those cars often is people say, great idea, but too early. Is that often sort of the problem with concepts, is that they're never sort of quite of their time?
Yeah, I mean, it's true, and I think there's a famous Ford engineer called Richard Parry Jones who I used to know reasonably well, not super well, but I enjoyed speaking with him a lot. And he passed away sadly just a few months after he'd written the intro to my Ford book. And I remember talking to him one day, and I said, well, Ford had done minivans when minivans were a thing. And he says, yes, Steve, but remember, we had those minivans, but we had them too early, and the worst thing we could have done would have been to do a minivan based on the Escort back in the 80s. And it was a reminder to me, it's all about timing, right? Yeah. So 2K2, I mentioned earlier, would have been a brilliant idea if they could have got it to market, not for the year 2002, but maybe a little bit earlier.
Okay.
But there's also the whole Rover thing. They were trying to figure out, they had to invest the money in Rover. It's a question of timing, right? So it's easy to say, people say to me, they should have made that. Well, they should have made that if they could have made money, is really the answer, So yeah, it's a question of timing.
Yeah, fantastic. Oh, we've got another question.
Could I ask where the 3 end colours came from? I'm assuming that the red is the same as your book cover, is it? Of the red.
Well, now you're getting into a story then. Okay. So there's a bit of myth going on here, and I'll try and give you what I know, and I've dug a little deeper. So there's the blue, and there's the sort of sometimes pink, sometimes purple, and then there's the red, right? And the story that was floating around for the longest time is this: blue is a BMW color, naturally, Bavarian blue skies, etc., etc. Okay, so you got blue on one level, and then in the design archives there are drawings by a guy called Manfred Rennen, who is one of the 3 designers that BMW had in the early 70s, and he had 3. Manfred Rennen was one of them, and Rennen drew up some color schemes of the 3.0 CSL as a racer with Texaco livery, because they were courting Texaco, which is obviously a red-based color. And red and blue are kind of like opposite ends of the spectrum, etc., etc. And what sits in the middle is kind of a pinky purple sort of thing. So Renan allegedly drew the colours of trying to blend Texaco red with primary colours never mix. So it's a red and a blue, and he drew the pinstripe with a purple or a pink alternative between them to balance the two strong colours. So that's great, and that's the accepted story. So I went and asked the man that no, and he says, no, that's completely not true. So I have one other person to ask. So I asked a man, so there was a man in charge of sales and marketing at the time called Bob Lutz. And so I asked Bob, and I said, well, can you remember if that's true? And Bob probably swears more than any human being I've ever known, so I won't say it in public, but he didn't agree with that. And so Bob does not think that that was the reality behind it at all. I have one person left to ask, which was the boss of Manfred Brennan, which is the name I mentioned earlier, which is Paul Brack, and he's 91, or maybe 92 now. I will ask Paul, and I will try and get to the bottom of that story. But the working theory is that it was the mix of Texaco red and BMW blue. Watch this space when I do the next book, and I'll give you the rest.
Well, I suppose kind of, what is to come next?
So I'm going to start the next one on Tuesday, actually. I'm on a flight to Munich on Monday afternoon. So this goes back about, 3 years ago now? I'm sitting in Adrian's office. Now, Adrian is maybe 6-7 foot tall. I don't know, maybe 8 foot tall. Nobody knows. So he's got these giant chairs. I'm sure most of your car enthusiasts, you know what a Lamborghini Countach chairs are like. There's this sort of giant recumbent thing. So he can sit in these in a way that normal humans can't. So he sits in these giant, oversized Lamborghini Countach chairs, just about fitting in. And he leans forward and he says to me, Steve, I think you should do these as a set. And I'm thinking, actually, I was going to do 2 books, and I thought it'd be a great idea. He goes, no. I think you should do it as a series of sets. Well, let me write the first one before we go down that path, eh? And he goes, no. Seriously, think about it, because then you know what to write versus what not to write to follow. I hadn't thought of that sort of thing. I mean, I'm quite a reasonable strategic thinker, but I wasn't thinking that far out. So I was like, okay. So there will be 2, if I get my act together, there will be a follow-up set based around them, and then there will be a final set 6 years' time around purely sort of secret BMWs.
Okay, even more secret BMWs.
Extra secret BMWs. Well, I mean, they have a warehouse of stuff and all this. There are plenty.
Will there be any secrets left? Which I don't know.
I don't know. From what I can see, it could go on forever. It could go on for 6 years. So that's the plan. But I think there's enough there to keep people going for the next few years.
I think they'll be well occupied. Yes. And so again, talking about secrets and the future. So I know you can't reveal too much, and I'm sure that you're sworn to secrecy for things that you're not allowed to talk about. But what is next for BMW?
Well, I mean, thankfully they're fairly open and honest in as much as the car you see there, the Vision Neue Class A is, and maybe it's worth talking about the cover design generally a little bit, but the cars on the cover there are all cars you could drive, okay? And each of them was a concept car that inspired a road car. And one of the things that we were quite passionate about in the book was to tell the story through to the Neue Class A to come. And so, that's where I think we're pretty open about it in the book here, is that concept car inspired the road car that will come down the road, along with that, which obviously was a 50 off run 2 years ago, and that car became the i8. So what's to come is quite a significant shift in design language, and they've revealed the 2 concept cars, the Vision Neue Class, Vision Neue Class X, the SUV, and they're so excited over there about these cars. I mean, designers generally get quite excited, in fairness. I mean, it's in their nature. So, but there is a degree of, this time we've done something really special, and they're genuinely committed in their minds creatively. I mean, the cars are ready in terms of creative work. They're, testing, I think, is just about seen in the press, but they are, they're really excited about what's to come. And it's not just about electric. I mean, that's a design language
Yeah.
to follow, right? And it's a big shift. It's a big shift from where they've been in recent times, but they are brimming with confidence, excitement, and a degree of humility. I mean, that's one of the things I've noticed with them. The cliche of a car designer is they're a bit arrogant. They're not. They're really, some very strong characters, don't get me wrong, but they are by and large not remotely arrogant as a design team. So to see their confidence, the excitement of where they're going, I can see where it's coming from.
It does feel like the way you talk about the people that are involved, the company as a whole, particularly from a design point of view, and obviously it's a design-led company, but there is real enthusiasm for the brand, for the cars that are coming, for what you're doing. It seems like they seem really enthusiastic about getting some of these stories out there that that it must be really a fantastic thing for you to have that enthusiasm behind you to urge these things forward, and then to want to keep making books about these sort of things.
I mean, honestly, it's just charming. I mean, I got an email from Christopher Vile tonight, who's the head of exterior design. Like, I'm so excited. Like, you coming next week? They're really into it. I mean, they're really, really into it. And sometimes I sort of pinch myself and go, well, it's just a book at the end of the day, but it's not. It's the company's soul, right? Yeah. And to be trusted with it was, goodness me, it was a bit of an honor, but I mean, what a risk, I mean, I could get run over by a bus, it could be rubbish. Adrian could put all the pages in the wrong order, their enthusiasm for it probably motivated, I think, Mel and Adrian, you'd probably say it motivated us, didn't it? I mean, we could see it, the enthusiasm behind all the designers there. And so that sort of, that's how they lift each other's enthusiasm, if you like, I guess. Certainly I felt it.
So and obviously enough to do more books, which is going to be great for us eventually. Yeah.
I'm waiting for the more 18-hour days I went through in November, but exactly. It was. I mean, it's a bit like you come to the end of a party like, oh, it was so good, it's never going to happen again. But we did all enjoy the party so much. So let it continue, sort of thing. I think really.
Great stuff. Oh, I cannot wait to look forward to. I can't wait for the other books.
Yeah, I can't wait to finish it.
Get working. Tuesday, you say. Excellent stuff. Has anyone got any other questions? Oh, fantastic! We got one now.
Tommy here. Just want to take you back quickly to the garnish. Why didn't they feel like they invested a lot of money with rebuilding that cause? Somebody spares must have put a lot of budget behind. Why did you so?
Well, Adrian is a bit of a lover of Italian 70s car design. And so there's that element to it. He also speaks Italian. And he had, sadly, Marcello Gandini, as I'm sure many of you know, passed away about 8-10 weeks ago. So there was a degree of enthusiasm around that. And it was also a forgotten car. And there is another Bertone car called the Spy Cup, and that's a bit of a forgotten Bertone concept car as well. And there's a strong sense of romance that flows through this company. I mean, you can talk to a 32-year-old designer and he will happily trot off saying, oh yeah, on the Vision 2002, the 2002 Homage, I wanted the yellow lamps on it because it looks like the romance of the rain in 70s cars. And I'm like, he wasn't even alive in the 70s, but in his mind, yellow headlamps are incredibly romantic. So he wanted, they instinctively have it so much in them, whether they're 32 or 62, that it flows through them. But one of the things that Adrian once said to me was, they cherish the flames, but they don't worship the ashes. So they are completely aware that if you get held back by what you did, you're just going to keep repeating the past. And, there's a little bit where, if you look at something like Alfa Romeo, they're sort of trapped into everybody wants an Alfa Romeo to look like an Alfa Romeo. And then where do you go forward if you keep making a modern car look like an Alfa Romeo from the past? So that's probably BMW's creativity, is that desire to keep moving forward, I think.
So what did you make of the Bangle era?
Well, Bangle's fascinating. So you must have interviewed him a few times, and goodness me, he's
Fantastic.
fantastic. I mean, I'm sure he's great value for money in an interview environment. So Chris Bangle.
What about the cars?
Well, the cars are misunderstood. So, I mean, one of the things that gets talked about is flame surfacing. Yeah. So, if you talk to, and Anders Warming is now the chief designer of Rolls-Royce, he designed the original Z4, and that is really the only flame surfaced car. And there's a chart in the book, there's one floating around there now, which is top secret 24 years ago, but it was called the bookends chart. And it showed the relationship to all the different designs. What Chris was trying to do was open up BMW's design language. And the cars are quite playful, I think, is fair to say. And there's a purity to, for example, I always get my numbers wrong, the E65 series, that was said to be a bit flame surfacey, but it was actually Zeppelin surfaced. And there was a designer called Davide Arcangeli who sadly died like a week or so of leukemia, really young, really suddenly. And they were so inspired to keep the integrity of his design intact. And that was inspired by a Zeppelin. It's got the dirigibles and it's sort of all sucked in. They would go for it and really go down that path of real hardcore experimentation.
Do you think that Bengal and Co were hard done right? I can remember being told by directors at the time that they subscribed to it, they signed up to it. It wasn't just Bengal.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a degree of expectation that you can always assign one designer, but it's a team, right? So, but what Bengal always did was Bengal was always very clear that he stood by that design. So when there were rocks thrown at him by the press, he would take them. And Chris never designed a single car while he was at BMW. He was the boss. That wasn't his job, but he stood by his team when people were throwing rocks at him. But I mean, it absolutely has to be the board that signs off a design, as it should be, yeah.
Do you think that era freed BMW from a sort of possibly a more sort of like you say with Alpha, it was that era that stopped them becoming the kind of Alpha, and that BMW design language opened up because of that Bengal era?
Yeah, I mean, being unafraid to push the boundaries is what keeps you moving forward, right? Yeah. And inevitably, you're going to trip along the way. I mean, inevitably, there's going to be the odd mistake. I mean, one of the mistakes that Chris pointed out is, has anybody got an E60 here? No, that's all right, it's good. So if you close the boot in it, Chris pointed out to me that they made a terrible error, which is it looks like the boot's always open because of the closure angle has there's too many nods going on there. There's a shadow there that makes it look, and he said, that's like a beginner's mistake. We completely screwed that one up. He said, So, mistakes large and small are what you learn from, I guess.
Yeah.
You'll never see they'll never do that again.
Sorry, Simon.
Speaking of mistakes, the XM, how and why was that? Based on the fact that we had the M1 as a unique platform, and then took opting to go for the somebody whatever it is as a unique platform MCO. Is that discussed widely there?
Yeah. No. Domikoy Dukek is the head of BMW brand as opposed to Adrian runs across group. And I said to him, well, look, sell me an XM. Tell me XM why, and it will go in the book. So I'll tell you as he told it to me. So there was a project called i16, which would have been essentially an extensively reworked i8, and a senior designer said to me, you can find 200,000 Instagram people that will tell us to make a new M1, but you find me 20,000 customers. And the segment isn't really kind of there for those sort of cars. But, just let's watch all the premium SUVs go floating on by now, and but you look where the profit opportunity is. It's as simple as that. And also there's a flip side to it, which is XM has a powertrain that is perfect for M5, right? And you've got to look at architecture from a powertrain perspective as well as anything else, because it's a huge investment, particularly today in electrical architecture and platform architecture. So, that's as much of an answer, which is, without sort of offering my stylistic view on it, which perhaps is maybe what you're asking for, the rationale for that vehicle made total sense, yeah.
Oh no, I agree that from a purely cost perspective, but given the opportunity, I've had the same discussion with the BMW designer, and he said exactly the same thing, but the opportunity to create a unique platform, and I understand that the accountants would get from all of the sort of
Yeah. Yeah. At least we didn't disagree with each other.
Yeah, I think that was mentioned.
Yeah. I mean, let's be clear. Is China and bits of Beverly Hills are very different to here, where you've got blue blood British brands drifting all around here. That's it's a different market. Yeah.
I was mentioned, is there something that you wanted to include in the book and BMW actually said we'd rather you did it?
Surprisingly little. I would say 5 paragraphs are changed in that book from what I wrote, and I'm amazed, if I'm perfectly honest with you. I lived in fear that the PR people were going to get hold of it when it had gone to press, and they're going to say, "What? You're discussing the future cars? You talk?" No. In fact, the PR people are just so happy that somebody's able to say everything. It actually only is good for the brand, right? So, apart from 5 paragraphs, it's absolutely what I wanted to say. Yeah. And I don't know how many paragraphs are in it, but it's good. There's more than 5. So,
Fantastic. I'm another one there.
Reading the book, it's very obvious that internally BMW celebrate design. But as shown, a lot of it's kept secret. I think going through this process, and especially Adrian being so keen at being made, do you think they might present more of this to the public going forward?
well, the thing is, if the company presents it, it has to go through a corporate lens. So I've worked corporate side myself, right? So it's not like I'm going to knock that. You have to put a corporate face and a story that has the best face. But obviously there's a degree of sanitation that goes on when you do that. And so I think there's a cathartic element doing it this way, where BMW doesn't pay me. I didn't say it, but I mean, BMW did not pay me at all, sort of thing. And that's because I said I do not want to be paid for it. That is the story, right? And that's got to be good, to be honest. And the company has an obligation, as everybody would for shareholders, to put the best face forward. But this way, you get the best of everything, where you get to see BMW naked, if you like. And with a 5-paragraph change, I think that's pretty good going, to be frank.
I think we had another question there. Sorry, yes.
Yeah, so I was going to ask the Bagwell question, but Steve beat me to it. So, incredibly talented people setting the direction of an organisation, but is there any external influence? So more recently, there's the kind of kidney grill on the new, I think, 3 and 4 series. Did you get a sense that the marketeers are influencing the team, or are they really in their own microcosm and bubbles? And whatever's going on the outside world, well, we kind of know best, right? We're setting the direction. Or is there a marketing consumer?
How do I answer that with the former board member of sales and marketing in the room? No, they're completely toothless. No, that's not the word. What would you say, Ian? Did you ever have any influence over the design?
Yeah, clearly. At the end of the day, the board signs off and the board sets direction. And the change to the grille was a very important step in the design language. But to put Adrian's point on it as well, they made proposals and we made choices. And this car, or the original concept car behind this, was the car we showed at Pebble in, 2012, 2011, something like that. So that had a very strong impact on the market. And therefore that grille design became something we talked about.
Is that the car we're totally talking about?
Yeah.
Yes, there's 50 of them made 2 years ago. Yeah.
Through a few iterations. So we'd shown Pebble first, and then we showed it at Villa d'Este, and then we showed it in, I think, Shanghai.
Yeah.
Put numbers on them and made them a race spec. And
then there was the 50 off
the
road
50
going
off,
one
and
2 years
the
ago.
50 off is off a production product as well.
Totally, yeah.
adapting that design to a production car again. You know, and
That story of that car reminds me. So the you probably remember Wong Kyu Kang, who designed that car. So Wong Kyu Kang's a lovely guy who's the most polite human being I've ever met, actually, who designed that car. And the guy who designed the production version of it that came out 2 years ago, he said, "Oh, please express my my praise towards it." So I connected by email, and I watched this thread where they're just congratulating each other, and there's two designers of the original concept, and the Victor Barr, who's the designer of the road-going one from 2 years ago, and it was quite sweet to see these two designers, one of whom's at a certain Korean manufacturer, and one of them is still at BMW, exchanging emails about the various designs. So yeah, they're both very happy with where it turned out.
excellent stuff. Fantastic. Oh, we've got another design, the question over there.
I had a couple of questions for you. The first question you already answered, the language completely great, isn't it? My I hate when it's real. You should take you out. The second question is, you mentioned the warehouse, the art movement and the way it's went on, it was so information. Was there I don't know, if you think what's the one thing you'll talk about our cars to have some of the things? What's the one thing really make you free? John. That's the thing I want to take home on the second guess or something.
Oh, well, the image I have in my head is actually, and I'm not really into racing cars particularly, but the image in my mind was when the guy said, "Oh, if you want, we'll go up to the motorsport floor," and the lights come on, and there's all the Formula One cars, ding, 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 and it's like the Bond glare, and it's like, oh, and there's the Pro Car M1s and the art car, and I'm like, well, that's an unrepeatable experience, and I can illuminate that in my head in a heartbeat. That's an image that will never leave me to the day I die.
The art cars in one position or one location is quite spectacular.
What, all of them together? Oh, wow.
Normally, there's one or two missing.
Yes.
Occasionally, they're all together.
They're magical to see. I have to say, yep, absolutely.
Well, I think that might be. We could do another hour on that. So possibly next time we'll have to swap seats. Then you can come and do another. Yeah, that'd be fantastic. Well, thank you so much for joining us, and it's been absolutely fascinating. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. So we are going to hang around for a little bit longer. There's some books of yours to have a flick through over there and ask more questions once you've had a little read through it. There's some magazines to have a flick through. There's also some drinks as well. So please, stick around for a little while, and we'll be about to chat to you as well. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you very much.